This is a TEDx Media House production.
Okay, Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to be on our platform. Vanessa is a PhD candidate at Albert Einstein University in the Bronx, and she also is a co-founder of Project Inspire, which is an initiative in East Africa to get more young people pursuing STEM, especially to solving challenges specific to the African continent. So thank you so much for joining us, Vanessa. Could you tell us a bit more about your background and the work that you've been doing at Project Inspire?
So, I'm a born and raised Tanzanian. I did my primary education, secondary school education in Tanzania before I went to Swaziland for high school, and then came to the US for college. I'm currently a PhD candidate in biomedical sciences, and I'm pretty much studying the effects of HIV and substance abuse on neuropathogenesis. So that's kind of my PhD program. Kind of what led us into starting Project Inspire. We started it around 6 years ago. I was still in college, and friends of mine realized that young people in secondary school students don't get informed career guidance, career options into courses they could pursue once they go into university, especially for Tanzania. I'll give you an example. The way the education system is organized is you come from primary school, then you go to ordinary level, which is Form 1 to Form 4, where you do all the sciences, all the courses, like including sciences, or you can go into commerce. After Form 4, you do your national examinations. Then you decide to which courses you want to specialize in for the A levels, which are 2 years. So being a science person, and I know more about PCM and PCB, people who are interested in sciences, they go into PCB, PCM, CBG, which is physics, chemistry, biology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, chemistry, biology, geography. Yeah. However, if you do PCB, which is pretty much physics, chemistry, biology, most of the students think about is being a doctor. That's it. That's like, I'm doing this, I'm gonna go into med school. If it's not being a medical doctor, perhaps pharmacy. That's kind of where they kind of think about, but there are so many career options. I wanted to be a doctor before I was exposed to different career options. Yeah, but after being exposed to them, I was like, actually, I'm not, as much as I would love to treat patients, I wanna solve it solve it right before then. So I was interested in research. I was like, there's so many questions that are unanswered out there that I really want to pursue. So kind of biomedical research was a kind of line for me. And I did biochemistry, and I also double majored with statistics because I also liked numbers. I thought I loved playing with numbers. So that was kind of my other major that I did. So, and after doing that, really inspired me going into my freshman year, being like, actually, this is really exciting. And I think other Tanzanians should know about it. So we started doing like outreaches to schools, and we had a group of like 20 people from different fields. And we still do them. But one thing we realized actually is the STEM related fields, they really need more activities like science, technology, engineering, mathematics, because there is very little guidance, first of all. Very few people end up in careers related to STEM. And thirdly, another problem was the number of women who actually pursue and end up in jobs in the STEM careers are very few in Tanzania. So we're like, this is a great opportunity. Being young people, talking to other young people, they can easily relate, and we can share our experiences with them into how we got where we are. Mm-hmm. So we started doing activities related to STEM. We do annual STEM youth boot camps. We've done 4, and we're supposed to have a 5th one to be announced soon, where we gather youth from the age of like 13 to 21 from all over Tanzania. We gather like 70 to 100 young people together in a camp for 1 week, where they come and solve a problem. the way the bootcamp are organized is we identify a challenge. I'll give you one example. One of the bootcamps where I facilitated a class was a chemistry class, where we identified that there is a problem with the water, sanitation, and hygiene in Tanzania. It was soon after cholera outbreaks in Tanzania. So the project we designed is I had a group of like 20 students. I went out into the field where local communities, they identified open wells, and they took water samples, assessed the environment, and took notes about some of the factors that might be contributing to the poor water or sanitation outcomes in the area. They took samples and they measured like things like copper, iron, and other metals. They also did like E. coli cultures, microscopy to look at like small organisms. And this allowed the kids to actually apply what they learn in class in real life environment, where they can use their science, what they learn in class to solve like community problems. Then the other aspect of these boot camps is we have a lot of young people who have ideas. So I have an example of one young person who was really interested in converting plastic waste into bricks. So we bring these kids together, we kind of guide them through their prototypes, things they should be considering, the sciences they should be applying in order to develop their prototypes. So the one youth actually ended up even forming like a small company where he could even employ people, and they were building bricks that could be used to build houses. So this is a person who is applying STEM in actually solving community problems. So that's kind of one project we do. And the next thing we were like, we are really addressing kind of like older age group. We need to start slower, like when the kids are really growing. So we started a program called Rising STEAM Stars. And the STEAM is science, technology, engineering. We incorporated arts and mathematics for the young kids, where we have like bi-weekly, we would have on weekends, bi-monthly, on weekends, these kids will come in and will do different science experiments, technology experiments, etc., with the young people who will be facilitating these activities who are into STEM also, and kind of inspire these kids, get them excited about science. And that's kind of one of the ways in which we are approaching. We work with schools where we go and facilitate. Some schools have science clubs, so we go and do activities with them. Different, like we have mathematics activities, engineering activities, and so forth. And this way we have kids between the age of 4 until 12 who are really seeing, wow, you can have a volcano eruption just from using the baking soda from the kitchen and vinegar. And that's like a chemistry that really sticks. By the time they get to higher education, like we hope that we're inspiring them into being like, actually chemistry is cool, engineering is cool. I can build my own elevator like with popsicle sticks. So we do kind of those activities with them. And the last thing we've also started is we are selling science kits. And actually we supplied, I think 2 years ago to Zimbabwe, where, yes, yeah, where we have experiments packaged to like in small. So we have like chemistry kits. So we have I'll give an example, an acid and base reaction kit. So it has a manual where a child can read, and we have all the ingredients where they can follow the steps and do like different activities and reactions. And these kits are first of all meant, because primary schools do not have labs. So like they take home labs where they can actually work from home and have their own mini lab project, and also helps like gives an opportunity for parents to have the kids learn science from home with just buying them a kit where the kids can actually follow instructions on themselves and do them with them. And they're very project-based activities that allow kids to first think critically, creatively, and hoping that at the end of when they finish the activities, they have actually applied what they learn in schools into real life. So for instance, in the curriculum, they learn about circuits, I think in grade 4. So we have kits where they actually connect the series and parallel circuits, and they have LED lights going on and off with different colors. We have like another one where they build traffic lights. So they kind of see traffic lights. They're like, we know how that works. And that can stay in a child's, like it's kind of stays in them. And in the future, hopefully they'll love and stay into the STEM careers. So that's kind of what we do.
Oh yeah, that's pretty awesome. Especially since we're seeing so many young people being involved in the innovation, and
Yes.
applying
Yeah.
a lot of the science or the STEM principles to actually come up with solutions.
Yeah.
So, do you know what are some of the challenges or even the measures that have been taken to deal with education in this pandemic?
So that's a very good question, and I know different countries are taking different approaches. For Tanzania, I think the schools were closed for a period of time. I think between March to June, they just opened recently, so
Mhm.
schools are back on. But one of the things that I applaud, like what the government did, was they introduced TV programs. So they had TV programs for almost all the class levels where the students could tune in and they could listen to teachers teach them. Of course, that's not perfect because not everybody has access to the TV, but that was kind of, I think they also had radio programs. I'm not really sure, but I know for sure the TV programs. So the government really tried on that part, at least to reach to the students for public schools. Private schools, on the other hand, they had homework packages, they had Zoom activities. So that's one of the things they kind of tried to do. On our side, it was as much as we had to pause our activities, but it was also an opportunity for us to sell our science kits. So we were able to supply them and be like, you kids can actually do science at like the kids. Parents, a lot of parents were complaining that they were bored, like they had no activities to do with kids. And we're like, we are giving you this activity for you to bond with your child.
Yeah.
So we have one science kit that's a construction kit where they build a complete house. Um, so you would see parents with their children sitting down, building a house from scratch, putting up the roof and the doors. And it's really an engaging project, like engaging for them. It was engaging for them during that time. So that's kind of what different initiatives tried to do. I know there are some like different phone companies had arrangement with other companies where they were supplying free tuition via phone. So you just have to log in and you can get answers to questions, etc. So there are different things that different parties tried to play around along like during the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think in Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
the ministry announced that they would try to do radio lessons.
Yeah.
With lessons, it's with radio, it's good, right? Because it's a very widely available
Yes.
media, and
Yeah.
much as you, I think some people even try to criticize it, like, oh, why don't people have the internet? And the reality is, it's inaccessible, and data is really expensive compared to, I guess, being in the U.S. where everything is it's widely available. I mean, even here though, not everyone has access to internet. We are in these pockets, these liberal pockets, of where people have are in more like the middle class areas, but in some rural places, some people simply just do not have access to the internet. And I think radio is a great idea. So in Tanzania, do you guys do IGCSE or IB? What curriculum do you guys
So we do the national examination. So it's a certificate for secondary education, examination education, something like that. So it's not IGCSE or IB. It's just the local program that we have. There are some schools that offer Cambridge and IGCSE and IB, but for the public schools, it's the local curriculum, education curriculum, which is British based.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that also makes it easier, right? Because if people are looking at the same syllabus, then organizing those lessons is a lot easier.
Yeah, it was easier because they were all supposedly using the same syllabus, like in schools. There are different like tweaks around, but yeah, it's the same syllabus throughout.
Yeah. I think that's pretty exciting that you guys have been able to identify this opportunity in the face of the pandemic. I would be interested to know if you guys have faced any challenges with supplying, with increased demand and then a lot of things being shut down. And you can tell me about that. But I'm also interested, are there other opportunities that have come out of this, or where you think we can start adjusting our education system to be more adapted to this new reality?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first, well, I'll start with opportunities right there. I think it's especially for the African context. Luckily, until right now, fingers crossed, the cases have been low. So things are getting back to normal, which is a great thing. But I think it's an opportunity for us to start evaluating other ways in which we can impact the kids in terms of education, like communicating the education. I know the students would go to school, learning class, but we need other alternatives out there where they can get this information. And as previously discussed, like there are companies that there are companies in Tanzania that are doing like online tuitions where they offer help with the school activities, etc. But I think for us at Project Inspire, it came as an opportunity for us to further think through our science kits, because it's a way of communicating the information without being there within a large group. And it allows the children to actually continue learning and having fun at the same time, because they're really fun, like playing around, seeing a volcano erupt, making a rainbow with different colors and all that. So it's fun, it's at the same time interactive. So it also gave us an opportunity for us to sit down and rethink of ways we can help towards as we are moving ahead. And also another thing is, I was impressed actually when during the pandemic, we did, because all schools were closed. So we did an online career guidance activity, like science activity for secondary school students. And we were like, okay, how are we gonna do this? This is Tanzania. These kids do not use Zoom. We know that like Zoom is a new thing that has just been introduced. Like it's not new, but it's new to us right now. And so we're like, let's go for it. Let's advertise it on social media. A lot of youth have social media, and at least the people who are in the urban setting right now, they have smartphones. So we used Facebook, Instagram to advertise. We had over like, I think 80 students who registered, and most of them were able actually to join on Zoom, go on mute. It worked really swiftly. And I was very impressed. And I was like, actually, to us, the technology might be difficult, but for the young people, it's easy because they're growing with it. So we can further incorporate it like into the education system, and we can have a lot of, they could be getting a lot of information. And one thing I remember when we talked about during our career guidance, it's for the young people themselves, they quite have an opportunity right now. All they need is internet connection, and they have all the information they need on internet. It's just for them to filter. If they want to learn coding, they can go online, they can go on and learn so much. They can go to Khan Academy where they can learn so much. They can go to Coursera. So there's so LinkedIn has professional courses. So there's so many opportunities that this pandemic has shown us that if we sit on our computers and decide to focus on like our self-growth, we can actually learn a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges we faced during the pandemic is supplies of equipment. Most of we do science activities. So the first thing was gloves. We supply like all our science, a lot of them have gloves. So when the pandemic came up, we're like, the gloves were all prioritized.
Yeah.
For the healthcare workers for obvious reasons. So there were things like that we needed to rearrange and reorganize. Not all science kits require gloves. So we ended up spending time on those kind of activities, like supplying those science kits. But there were also some shipments you would expect from China, etc., that we could not get on time. So that's kind of something that kind of interfered. And of course, we couldn't do our usual activities with students, which was sad because as much as you can do so much on Zoom, that interaction with young kids is really important for their learning. So we kind of missed that. And hopefully very soon we'll be resuming to that. And we are just working on how we're gonna do that to maintain a small number of students with maintaining hygiene and at the same time delivering the science education to them. Yeah.
So how long is the summer camp that you guys do for the project?
There are usually 5 days. But during holidays, usually during the Christmas holiday, so 1 week, and they are very intense. They start from, I think, 7:30 in the morning. They go until 11 p.m. But they're very in the morning, they'll go into class, they'll do field work, they'll have teamwork building, they'll have, like, we do like science slams where they present, like we give them a topic to present so that they can practice public speaking. And then they work in groups to actually do project presentations and all that. Then they get like we have speakers who come in to give the like career guidance talks, etc. So they're really packed, but it's not like they're in class throughout the day. It's like different activities. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's nice. So
they're fun for me to be in them.
So in terms of funding for your camp, do students have to pay to attend, or you guys have grants?
So we have a fee for the students to pay. However, the applications are merit-based. So we accept them and we ask them to pay the fee. If they cannot pay for it, we have like, we look for companies where they can match the fee. So we always have funders and supporters who have been supporting for the past years. Yeah. So for those who can pay, would pay, but if they cannot, we just like look for supporters who can match for that.
So far, what companies have you partnered up with for funding?
So we have worked with, we have worked with British Embassy, we've worked with Swiss Embassy, we have worked with Acacia, it's a mining company. We have worked with Nabaki Africa, which is like an engineering, they supply construction materials, as well as Sika. That's all. Then we've worked with the TCRA, which is Tanzanian Communication Regulatory Authority, which is a government organization. We have worked closely with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, and also a very big like people who have been really supporting us are universities, because they host these camps, because we need labs. Yeah, we need like good labs, etc. So we've been doing, and they're in-house activities where the students come and stay. So we have worked with a couple of universities around Tanzania in different regions where they have hosted these activities, which has been really great. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but getting funding is also very challenging. The usual challenge. But we try our best.
Do you guys have any experiences with things like load shedding? Because I know that's like a big barrier.
Sorry? With
load shedding, having access to electricity. Do you guys have
yes, we do. Not as bad in the urban setting compared to the rural areas, but yes, and that's one of the hindrances, like in, let's say, when they were doing the TV or radio shows with that burden. But yes, it's there widely. Not as they're working on it. I can say there's definitely an improvement over the past few years, but it's still there.
And what are the guidelines have people, or since schools are reopening, what does it look like for social distancing and masks?
I am not really, so with primary school students, they're not advised to put on masks because they're really young. And I know there are some secondary schools that are practicing putting on masks, some are not. But the main thing that they've been facilitating is hand washing. So the schools have been really trying to supply water and soap for the kids to wash their hands. And I've seen, I don't have direct access to schools, but I have seen some of the schools trying to, like in assemblies, they'll separate, like they'll try and keep like a meter away from each kid, kind of trying and maintaining that order. And so far, I think they opened like a couple of weeks ago. We haven't heard anything negative about, like it's been working, at least with the parents who have kids going back to school, and based on what we hear from schools and teachers' experiences. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. What else is there anything that you wish I had asked you that you would like to touch on?
So, wish you had asked me. I think one of the biggest thing, like this comes as an opportunity, as much as we are trying to work in Tanzania, but we are open into working with other countries. I mentioned like we had like, there is a program, I'm not sure if you're aware of, it's called the Next Einstein Forum, which is in Africa. Yeah, so we worked with the ambassador in Zimbabwe who, like during the Africa Science Week, we delivered kits and all. So we are open into, and we also did with Congo, and we're trying to get into more companies, but we are really open into working with other countries and learning also from them. Would love to get like, have you, for instance, do like career guidance with kids, because I think it's very cool if they would hear like a perspective about what chemical biology is, because I'm so sure there's so many people it doesn't make sense to, because chemistry and biology in Tanzania are two independent things.
Yeah, I think even people in the field right now are still like, what is chemical? Are you a biochemist? And you're like, no.
Exactly. So a lot of people can learn about that, the different opportunities that are around that. So like, I think it's time for us as Africans to just come together as African scientists to change the status quo of education in our countries.
Yep. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining us. I think this has been very informative. Where can our listeners find you on social media or to reach out to you?
Right. So we have a website. It's Project Inspire. The project is with K, and K is for knowledge. So it's Project Inspire at www.projectinspire.co.tz. And also we have Instagram page with the same name, Twitter, Facebook. Also, we have a lot of videos on YouTube about the activities we do, and people can go there. They're cool. It's kids doing science. Who else wouldn't love that? So they're really cool. But yes, we have all of that out there.
And I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions that have almost nothing to do with the episode. You just tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
All right.
So what's something that's happened in the pandemic that's become part of your daily routine?
I talk to my family every day. I didn't do that before, but staying home for like 3 months, it has been part of my routine. I call them every single day, both my family and my in-laws at least. And it has just become, even right now, because I'm back in lab, I create time to talk to them every single day. And if I don't get to talk to them, they're getting a text, and the next day they're getting a call from me. So that has been part of my life. So I thank the pandemic for opening that up for me.
And in a perfect post-pandemic world, where's the first place that you're going to go, or what's the first thing that you're going to do?
The very post-pandemic thing I will do, and I will definitely be in Tanzania. That like the first thing they open the borders up and we can travel, like I'm on a flight back home.
Yeah.
So that's I want to be in the Zanzibar beaches for sure.
Yes.
Like
they're so beautiful.
I miss those beaches. I miss the sand. I miss the beautiful environments. Like that's definitely a place I want to be.
And what is something that you hope either personally or as a society we keep after the pandemic?
Washing hands. I realized how much our hands are dirty until this pandemic. Like that's one of the things I'm like, definitely. I am not sure if I can go back into blowing candles as of yet, because seeing the science around it, I'm like, well, maybe we can hold that, but definitely washing hands. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. For our listeners, could you tell us a bit about your background and the work that you do?
Thank you so much, Desna. It's a great pleasure to be on your platform. Really was looking forward to this. So my name is Farai Munjoma. I am from Zimbabwe, but based in Nairobi, where I work as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the African Leadership Group. Basically, we are in the business of providing access to leadership training and entrepreneurial training for young people in Africa. We're on a mission to educate 3 million leaders by 2035 for Africa. Prior to that, I was involved in the startup world, where I studied an education startup called Shasha Network in Zimbabwe, which provides high school learners access to academic courseware to prepare them for examinations, and has also evolved into providing early career development training for young people transitioning into university or the world of work. So that's basically my background, education and entrepreneurship.
So you also believe that entrepreneurship is really critical to the development of the continent?
I definitely believe that on a continent where the majority of the people are young and there isn't much investment coming, the only way we can create jobs for each other, the only way we can keep people out of the streets is if other young people take up creating jobs and start employing other people, because research shows that when a young person starts a business, they're going to employ other young people. So if you're going to get all these other young people off the streets and not in the bad things, then we might as well get into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I like that. So can you tell us a bit about some of the challenges that have come about in education in the communities that you work in? I know so many different countries have started doing lockdowns and schools had to either do remote learning or just abruptly end their terms. And what have been some of the approaches that people have taken to address the distant learning?
Yeah, I think in Africa, it's been a very big challenge for many students. I think parents are still in the process where they're trying to find out the best way to support their kids, because soon after the lockdown, many schools on the continent for which serve the majority of the people, and those are public schools, were not yet prepared to go online because everything has been sort of brick and mortar. The idea of e-learning has been something for 2025, right? And people are still trying to juggle the idea of like, do we need technology? Do we not need technology? Then people woke up one day and they have to be on a Zoom call. If you're a teacher that was highly depending on your notebook and on your blackboard, you now have to open a Zoom account. You now have to contact people using all these different platforms and email. Some people didn't even have emails, right? That's just the reality in Africa. So for many people, it was a big challenge. Broadband is still a big issue. So electricity and internet are still not as readily accessible. And these are just like the basic ingredients of e-learning, right? Us being in the edtech space, the assumption would be, we're excited that people are now at home, they're learning, but the reality is many of the students do not have access to internet at home. It's still expensive. They actually use institutional internet where they go to school and the school pays for Wi-Fi, and that's how they get access to the internet. So overnight, families have had to like re-budget and say, now we have to allocate money for XYZ's bundles for internet, etc. Right? So that's a big challenge that distance learning has faced. Just basic access to electricity, to the technology, and even the technological literacy that it takes to maneuver on a desktop. It's something that people underestimate and think, look, you're born knowing how to navigate on a web service or something like that, but it's not that easy. But the way that we've definitely seen people adjusting is, for example, in Zim, like you were mentioning, there has been the radio aspect. And I'm a big fan of radio, by the way. I think that's one of the technologies that in Africa we've just skipped. But I think if we are actually going to reach to more people, radio is still the biggest platform out there. So radio has come in. SMS learning has also come in because it's cheaper, but then it's also limited because you can't put sophisticated graphs on SMS, right? But you still can have basic literacy training. So these are some of the innovations that we're starting to see take root in societies. It doesn't mean that they've not been there. They've always been there, but people are only realizing their usefulness now.
I guess for our listeners to contextualize the radio issue, in Zimbabwe, there's been a push to start conducting lessons on the radio so that they can reach more populations. And initially, some people thought this is kind of backwards, why are we doing this? But the reality is that not everybody has access to internet. I mean, even globally, you know, people have 3 or 4 children, and how do you govern, you know, time on the computer for all 4 children who have to, you know, do online learning? And so having radio lessons, especially if all students are doing the same curriculum, it provides, you know, just staggered time for a teacher's voice to just disseminate across multiple different cities, and without having to really reinvent the wheel, right? Because you just have to figure out how to broadcast and it's a go. How would people grade the assignments?
So many people have had to like really readjust their way of even assessing, right? Before we talk about gradings, like how am I going to assess these kids? Because in most cases, you know, you've got your physical paper with an exam, and this is like the typical African classroom. You write your exam, you submit your paper. Now you can't be at school, you're at home. So many schools have sort of like come with open book exams, which just means I was talking to a friend and they just mentioned that their university, for example, is not putting numbers on examination questions, right? Which means because people would then be on a question, say, number 2, please give me answer for number 2. And then the other person will give them the answer for number 2. But now when you remove the numbering, it makes it difficult to cheat, right? Because maybe it's one topic with the same context, with the same vocabulary. You know, if you're doing lungs, for example, in biology, everything is going to have to do with oxygen and air. So you're like, give me the answer on the oxygen question, but then there are 5 questions with oxygen there. So it's going to be difficult for you to cheat with your other counterpart. So students have had to really rethink through the idea of like assessments. People are having more essay-based, assessments, but also the timing as well has reduced. So instead of giving you like a 3-hour exam or 2-hour exam, we'll just give you like a fast crash course, 30 minutes, 1 hour to see how much you have left. But you also have to have an LMS system, right? Yes. Many schools do not have learning management software. And that means that you have to then download whatever you've written, send it via email, and in between all those things, so much is happening. So people are still trying to figure out how best this can be done. But this is not the scenario in many affluent schools. This is like general middle class public schools that are still trying to like figure this out. But some schools people haven't even gone back to learning. People are using WhatsApp to exchange notes, right? Because WhatsApp has WhatsApp bundles in most countries, which are more cheaper to access than having actual internet bundles. So teachers have resorted to actually sending test papers via WhatsApp and having their kids write and send PDFs back via WhatsApp. Yeah.
Oh, because if you do have a smartphone, you could just use one of those scanners from your phone.
Yes,
and that makes
exactly.
it easy to submit.
Exactly.
So what have you seen as being maybe the differences in the ways that, you know, Zimbabwe and Kenya have addressed some of the challenges of education?
So I think in a way, all the countries are still trying to figure out what's happening and what's the way forward. In Kenya, there has been huge panic because just in one of the small towns outside of Nairobi, from March to June, they recorded 4,000 teenage pregnancies just because the kids weren't going to school, right? So there's just been that realization that school was actually a safe place for kids to be, right? And now the first thing that people are trying to ask themselves is like, how and when do we get the kids back in the classroom, right? And in most cases, you know, that has been a big issue because there aren't enough resources available on the ground to assist the students with sanitation and sanitization and all these other things. Even the masks are expensive for some families, right? And the government is trying to figure out how they're also losing out money from a tax perspective. And they're also trying to reach out to then the donor community and say, how can you support us to do all this work? So depending on how many donors are really partnering with your country in Africa, there's going to be a really huge challenge for most education systems to come back, to pick themselves up, because government budgets are just not enough, to allow people to go back into the classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in the Zimbabwean context, we have the two different curriculums where people take the IGCSE, the Cambridge examinations, and then we have other students doing the ZIMSEC, which is our national examination board. And with ZIMSEC, the trouble is most of the schools are government funded, and they already had problems with that infrastructure and teachers striking because they weren't getting paid. But then in the private schools, students' parents are always willing to pay for different facilities. And how, I think in the Zimbabwean context, people who went to private schools, their families were even pushing that they could do testing. It was fine for students to go back to school. Then for students in public school, if teachers don't even have money to be paid, then they obviously cannot provide the same testing facilities. And then that ends up leading in some students being left behind.
Exactly. And there's going to be a really big problem just these past couple of months, right? There's going to be a huge gap that we're going to fill for the next coming years, just because in this specific time, the kid that is going to pass the November exam, it's not because you're smart or you're not smart. Some will be smart, but it's who had the parents that had enough money to pay for a tutor when schools were closed, to pay for internet when I wasn't getting access to an in-person live session, right? So then economic privilege then plays a really big part on the education outcomes for most kids, right? I have a younger sister of mine. She's just gone back to boarding school. And they're going on with their lessons because they do Cambridge, right? Some of her friends are still at home. The school said we cannot open because we might protect them within the school, but on their way to school, they're exposed to public transport, people in the street, wherever is they're getting to school. So it's better to actually have the kids at home and not expose them on their way to school, right? Because at school, you can always put measures, but what about on the way to school?
I guess if you're going to a boarding school, it's much easier to enforce it because it's just one journey to school and then the next journey home, and people can take precautions. Exactly.
And you can also even put barriers of who comes into the school and who gets out of the school, right? Yeah.
Wow. So
just like a proper lockdown.
Yeah, COVID is really exacerbating all of the economic disparities.
Yeah, and it's actually not going to be funny because the amount of income that many parents are losing, right? If many people across Africa, either they're self-employed people that really don't have as much in savings as they should, the question is, after COVID is over, do they even have the amount of money necessary or enough to take their kids back to school?
Yeah.
Right? So it's touching on everyone, literally.
So as someone who's involved in EdTech, what opportunities do you see coming out to just innovate the whole education space, not only for this pandemic, but what will be beneficial going forward?
I think it's a good thing that this situation has come up at least early. It's just unfortunate that it's come through a pandemic, right? It's taken years for governments to realize that they need to install internet in schools, right? Like it's just a basic commodity that we're viewed as a luxury, right? Which then goes to explain how, as a society across many developing countries, we're still trying to understand the impact of the benefits of having internet. Right? It's not just about Facebook, right? It's not just about WhatsApp. There's a lot more that internet can bring to your communities. So I think the pause that has come up because of this will definitely get governments priorities straight in terms of putting more internet into schools. When you put internet into schools, you allow EdTech companies to innovate because they know that whatever they're going to create is going to be accessible to the students, right? It's also allowed the telco community to say, look, I run a big telecommunications company. What's my responsibility to this community? And that might mean zero rating all educational content for specific users, right? And what that means is I can go online as long as I have a specific link to an education platform. Data is not going to be taken from my account, right? And that's how a company which is in the telecommunications sector can reinvest into its people. But I also see just an opportunity for us to have a proper revamp of the education system in general. You know, do we have to have certain examinations, right? Do they need to exist? Do we need, do other subjects need to exist, right? Even our way of teaching, right? Do we need to have people going to class every single day, right? Do we even need someone taking 7 years in primary school? Yeah. For example, in the case of Zimbabwe, do we need people taking 6 years in high school, right? Because look, now information is ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. If you give a 3-year-old, or let's say a 4-year-old, I've done this experiment. You give a 4-year-old an internet-enabled device, you go on YouTube, you show them videos, you show them content, which is not even within their age range, within any traditional school syllabus. These kids will know and they will communicate whatever they've learned. Because internet does not put a barrier on your grade 1, so your syllabus ends here. Your grade 2, so your syllabus ends here. It's like, these are the learning outcomes, these are the deliverables, and how far you go is up to you. Mm-hmm. So we need to rethink all those things at every layer because, you know, education reform moves at like glacier speed. Like it takes ages for us to just move a pencil because we are comfortable with the outcomes of whatever has been produced by the legacy of the system.
So outside of WhatsApp, are there any other platforms that you've seen people really using in the EdTech space?
So definitely people, for example, in Singapore, you know, I have a friend that has started a virtual reality company, right? But it's Singapore. So they've all these cool VR headsets. You don't have to go to a proper lab. You know, there are all these things that have been created for you to be able to play around with virtual reality. You can't say that for students in Africa, right? Here we are seeing a different type of innovation, which is beyond WhatsApp. Like I mentioned, you know, SMS. There's a company here in Kenya called Ineza Education, and a lot of other countries where they've actually put the syllabus on SMS because it's cheaper. So they only charge 5 cents a week, right? And even at that 5 cents, some people aren't affording it.
Yeah.
So SMS, WhatsApp, it's basically more about the cost of the platform than it is about the features of the platform. Because we definitely have access to every other cool tech out there, but the question is accessibility. Is it going to require internet? Is it going to require... SMS works better because it doesn't require internet, right? So we've had more people taking it up, especially in Kenya. It's also cheaper to bill, because billing systems are an issue.
So what would you
Yeah.
find in your SMS?
What would you find in your SMS? So you have a repository of content, right? So assuming you are, for example, in your A levels, so they'll have small paragraphs on English, religious studies, math for lower grades, because it's basic arithmetic, physics, facts and figures, and then they give you multiple choice answers. So they can say, what's the capital city of Zimbabwe? And then they give you options for A, B, C, D, E. You dial *291#. It gives you, access to these questions. You respond with A. It gives you the second question until you've done with all the questions for that topic. Then it gives you an answer. So it actually tells you that within the country, for everyone that's using that platform, you are number 138 out of 50,000 students that are actively engaging. Yeah, it's very interactive. So they have a very cool user experience team working behind the platform. But the thing I was mentioning earlier on is with SMS, you cannot put a stoichiometry graph.
Yeah.
You cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about different languages. I'm not sure. I know in Zimbabwe we're mostly taught in English. What about in Kenya? Do you teach in English, or are lesson plans accessible in different languages?
So in Kenya they have Kiswahili, which is one of which is the local language that's spoken all over the country. They also have English. These are like the top languages that people speak and study in Kenya. Definitely there are other more, and this is like in most public schools and even private schools. Then you will definitely have other, French, Spanish, but it's a very small group of people that will take up those languages. But Kiswahili is definitely predominant across most of Kenya. But it's a standalone language, right? It's a standalone language. But then you do have the medium of instruction being English across all other languages, all other subjects, I mean.
I guess so. It means that initially developing this curriculum, people can just start with English. But I do see an opportunity since if, for example, in the Zimbabwean context, when they're broadcasting lessons, having it where we do try to translate the knowledge into different languages so that we can have more accessibility and more people being able to learn.
I definitely think there's a big opportunity there, because the gap in learning sometimes is definitely because of the language, right? But the thing is, some of the core languages that, like for example, mathematics, right? You're from Zimbabwe. I'm sure you know this book called New Ventures Mathematics, right?
Yeah.
Try envisioning that mathematics book in Shona.
But
like,
I think about science, right? But when you look at German people learn in German, French people learn in French, people who speak Spanish easily translation. And I think especially in the context of science literacy, it's the fact that we just don't have this vocabulary in our languages, right? But I think now is the time for us to really start translating and coming up with technology so that it's more accessible. And I was thinking about it in the context of COVID, right? So COVID, the symptoms are flu-like. How do you explain to Google why COVID is different than flu? Like
interesting.
But in English, it's easy. You have flu, you have COVID, and like in other languages, you can easily translate part of it.
Yeah. I think that's for example, in Zim, I have no doubt that we can pull this off if we get a team of highly knowledgeable people in the local languages and give them this assignment to work on, definitely. What is going to be the challenge is your Shona mathematics being applicable outside the context of Zimbabwe. Because you see, when you talk about Arabic, German, all these other languages, these are languages from civilizations that have taken hundreds and hundreds of years to influence not only local culture, but also culture outside, right? That's through economics, that's through religion, and so many other things, right? So they, like someone in Portugal teaching whatever language in Portuguese, knows that if he's going to go to Cape Verde, Mozambique, Angola, they're going to be people that can communicate and compare notes, right? It's all about comparing notes, at least in my perspective. Someone who's going to learn in English knows, like, if I travel to a lot of countries, I'm going to have people that I can compare notes with. If I understand my language, if I understand my Shona and my mathematics within the context of Zimbabwe, will I be able to then go to Harvard and use the same knowledge and apply it at a higher level, right?
And people do that though, right? Because that's why we have all these ESL, especially when you're going to grad school, right? So a lot of the times, and even as a Zimbabwean, I remember when I came here for undergrad, some of the terms in my chemistry classes, I was like, sorry, what? And then I would go on Khan Academy and then figure out that I knew what was happening. It's just that the language was different. But I guess there's actually some initiatives. UNICEF launched one maybe 2 years ago. And the effort is about translating science into more indigenous languages, so just so that people can understand, right?
Accessibility. And please don't get me wrong.
Right, and then even there's a company where they started explaining just really small concepts in Indian languages, and then there's another effort in Nigeria, and they've been starting like with Hausa and Yoruba. So it's not so much like to market people outside, but it's to explain the concepts. And then of course, if you want to go to certain universities, then you would have to know the English. But you know, sometimes it's even harder for us to understand different concepts because children would have to know you know.
Exactly.
Say what is
and it's true. Look, Desna, so I'm conflicted in my mind. Yeah. So there are two things that come up. I appreciate and understand the importance of indigenous language, especially in early childhood development in general, and even across. Like if I'm taught something in my local language, I'll understand it better, right? I'll understand it better. I'll even be more, articulate when it comes to understanding, to articulating the core fundamentals of that the subject or idea.
Yeah.
If I come in as someone wanting to invest in this project, I'm going to be like, what's the return on investment for translating this language? Or for example, in the case of some African countries that have at least 15 local languages, why should we, sort of like translate this subject into 15 different mother tongues, right? And then someone like, okay, guys, what are we trying to achieve with this? Yes, people are going to understand, but the amount of time that's going to take, it's a lot. Yeah. Let's just move with what's there. And that's where many people have sort of like been taken a bit. But it's good that young people like you and me are starting to think about this and sort of like trying to map the way forward of how it can be beneficial, because I have no doubt if things are taught in local languages, they can be even 10 times beneficial than in a foreign language, right? Even the self-esteem that comes from learning something in a language that's familiar to yours, it's good, right? Yeah. Because if you've been speaking in Shona or Ndebele at home versus someone that's been speaking English all their lives, and then you're given an English test, already there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for your insight. Actually, where can people find you to contact you on social media, your email?
I'm available on Facebook, Farai Munjoma, same as Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm active on all platforms. Or you can contact me at Farai, Farai, at shashanetwork.com.
We'll pivot to some lightning round questions. These have nothing to do with education, but just, you know, to hear how you've been dealing with the pandemic. So what's something that's come out of the pandemic that that has now become part of your daily routine?
Something that has come out of the pandemic that has become part of my daily routine. I think definitely it's been morning jogs were never a thing before, at least for me.
Yeah.
They were never a thing before, but now just to get out of the house and get rid of all that cabin fever, I'm definitely trying to take as much time out as possible. So yeah, though they sometimes turn into walks because I'm not like an intense workout person, but it's still been a very interesting part of my day-to-day life.
And in a perfect post-pandemic world, where's the first place you're going to go, or what's the first thing you're going to do?
I'm going to go to Cape Town.
Okay, I see that. I had a trip for Cape Town in November, and it's looking nice. 2021, 2022-ish now. And last question is, what is something that's come up in the pandemic that you hope as a society or personally that we keep forever?
I think the sense of community, you know, like I'm sure because we are now at home, where people were locked down at home, not so much movement. People have been reaching out to one another and just supporting each other online, you know, emotionally and just being present. And I think that sense of community that has come out of not having a fast-paced world is definitely something that we need to keep with us as we go. Because what makes us resilient in these times is that sense of community, knowing that I can lean on one other person and, you know, things get done that way.
All right, thank you, Farai. Thank you so much for coming on this platform. This has been very informative.
Thank you.